Hello, and welcome to today's webinar about our Spring 24 release and what's new in the Flatfile Data Exchange Platform. My name is Gottfried Zeringer. I'm the CMO at Flatfile, and I'll be your host for the webinar today. I'm very excited to have two of my esteemed colleagues with us today, John Bell, VP of Product, and Alex Rock, who heads up our developer experience team. You'll hear from each one of them in a moment. Before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping items. You can ask questions throughout the webinar. Please use a question function in your Zoom window. We'll address those questions at the end of the webinar in our Q&A session. And secondly, one of the most frequently asked questions, actually, can I get a copy of the slides? And the answer is yes. The webinar is actually being recorded, and we'll send a link out with the recording via email after the webinar. In terms of agenda, in today's webinar, we'll take a look at some of the new capabilities that we've added to our platform over the last few months. And fair warning, it's a long list. Our product team has been very busy. And for today, we've picked out some of the most interesting pieces that we thought might be relevant to this audience. In the first part, John will show us some of the new and very powerful new features for the non-technical end users who actually do the managing of the data. And then in part two, Alex will talk about some of the new tools and capabilities that are super useful for developers building data exchange solutions with Flatfile. And then we'll close with the Q&A session. But before we get started, I do see a lot of familiar names and customers in the audience here, but I also see some names that I haven't seen before, and they might not be quite as familiar with Flatfile as some of their existing customers and users. Just to provide a little context, I want to take a minute, talk about some of the key use cases that Flatfile addresses and how we address them. So one of the most common one is needing an embedded file importer in your app that allows end users to import data files such as CSVs or Excel spreadsheets or even PDFs into your app. That's certainly a very straightforward and common use case we see. But we also see a fairly complex data onboarding project where you need to help your customers to bring all the data that's necessary to start using your product or service into your application or your company. And this often includes various data sources and very complex data transformation needs. Or even more complex use cases we'll see when it comes to preparation of data for large data migration projects, where you'll need to transform data from one or even multiple legacy systems to a new business system. This often requires not only the extensive data cleanup and transformation, but also quite a bit of manual data review and back and forth between the teams that work on that data and all the business stakeholders and implementation experts that are part of that. And this is exactly why we've built the Flatfile Data Exchange Platform, and that helps our customers to save money and resources for those use cases, often help accelerate revenue, and while you're doing that, improving security and compliance, as you don't want to have personal identifiable data being emailed around, for example. Anyway, I guess, as I was saying at the beginning, the Data Exchange Platform is built for developers to build their workflow as their company needs them. At the same time, provides a highly intuitive user experience for end users, those business users managing the data, that makes their job easier and much more efficient. And in that Spring 24 release, we've addressed both of those needs. And first, we will start with the business side and hear from John about some very exciting new features about AI and collaboration for those very business users. So John, please take it away.
Excellent. Let me share my screen. Thank you, Godfrey. Excellent. Thank you all for joining us. As Godfrey said, the product team's been hard at work working on the product across a number of features, but we're really excited about AI Transform specifically, one of the features I'm going to show you today. It's really the easiest way to transform your data. Um, and part of why we're excited about this feature specifically is because it doesn't really require any special knowledge or um, special formulas to do rather complex and interesting things with the data. So I'll just show you how this works and give you a taste of what we're excited about here. Um, so when you come into your workbook, sort of the space where you view data, you edit it, and you validate it, you'll notice that there's a new action in the toolbar, and we refer to this feature as AI Transform. So whether you want to run a transformation on your entire data set, or you want to filter that data set down, so I can filter down, for instance, just my invalid records, then run the transformation. It's always at your fingertips, so easy to access in the primary toolbar. Now, when you click into AI Transform, you're brought into this safe space, this space where we load the first 10,000 records from the table that we were just viewing. And we give you an environment where you can prompt and preview the changes that happen from your prompt without necessarily having to commit to the result. And what this creates is this iterative loop where you can modify your prompt and see how it's going to affect your data before you actually commit to it. We fundamentally believe in this principle of don't trust, verify when it comes to working with AI. And when AI is engaged in transforming your customers' data, your data, we view that as sensitive. And so we work to protect it and keep it safe. But also, we want to put full visibility and full control into your hands when it comes to sort of seeing what's actually changing. So I'll do a quick orientation to this space, and then we'll jump into some examples. So the prompting bar is at the top. You can express those normal input. You can sort of express in natural language the kinds of changes that you want to make. I'll show what that looks like here in a second. But there are a couple of other things I want to draw your attention to first. One of the things that we think is actually quite important here is to be able to give the AI essentially a target. What exactly do I want to be modified and where? And so one of the easiest ways to do this is just to tell the model what field specifically you want to apply this change to. And so we've added this preview that shows you sort of a few of the fields that are in your file, but then you can also open it up and see all of the fields that are available to you. You can also just use the @ symbol to directly reference one of those fields in your prompt, and that will help sort of constrain and create a target for the AI to work against. You can also just select any of them from dropdown, not entirely sure how sort of a field is specifically named. You can sort of peruse and just click to also select. Additionally, you'll see that there are some recent prompts. So if you were viewing this for the first time, there would be example prompts and some capabilities of the system that you'd be seeing. But because we've used this before, the system actually remembers some of what you've done in the past, meaning that you can one-click use it again. And I'll show you a little bit more how that works here in just a second. And then additionally, in this dropdown, we try to include some contextual tips that really help you be successful at generating a prompt that will get you to a transformation that you're looking for. So let's actually, I'm just going to show you an example, but let's do, I'm just going to use one of the recent prompts to show you kind of how that works. You'll notice I clicked on a recent prompt, but rather than sort of immediately running the prompt, what it actually did is it just it just loaded, sort of copied and pasted that into the input field. And the reason for that is it allows you to use prior prompts almost like a template, because I can now modify this prompt to be something else. I can give it a different target. I can say, change the date format in the lease date, for instance, as opposed to the build date for the property, or the open date, etc. So what this actually means is that prompts that get a pretty successful outcome, you can actually reuse and modify, increasing the overall utility of each prompt. Let's go ahead and just run this prompt to show you kind of how this works. So I hit enter. The system, essentially what's happening under the hood is the system is taking that prompt. It's actually taking the schema. So it's just taking the names of all of the fields in my file, and it's giving that to the AI, and it's asking the AI to write the code necessary to transform a large large file here. So it's actually not passing any of the individual values. Those values are entirely invisible, as it were, to the AI model. This is part of our commitment to privacy and to security. So the actual values themselves are not being passed through in this feature, just the schema reference. You'll also notice that the change that was made, so it went into this load state and then loaded back again with the data. The change that was made is actually off screen because I referenced a field in a relatively wide file, I think 40, 50, 60 fields, off screen. So that's why we added this scroll to next change. This allows you to navigate to and from changes that are made across a relatively wide file pretty much instantaneously. So now my change is centered in my view. Let's take a look and see. All right, so my prompt was to change the build date or date built from this format to this format, and it looks like it worked pretty well. Knock this one out of the park. I want to pause here for just a second. I think what's important for us, if you're sort of familiar with Microsoft Word or Google Docs, track changes, this is sort of a similar pattern that we've applied at Flatfile when it comes to tracking changes. But this design is really indicative of how we think about AI interacting with your data, which is that it should be explicit about what the prior state of the data was and what the new state of the data is going to be in preview mode. And so you see both of those are present here. If I actually don't want necessarily to do sort of the full 4 figures or 4 numbers at the end, I could just come up, rerun this prompt, the slight modification, month, month, day, day, year, year. And let's go find, okay, so build date's right here. This is the sort of thing I didn't actually have to specify to the AI which of the 2 numbers I wanted from the year date. It was obviously because it has an understanding of human language and our patterns and ideas. It was able to sort of, roughly speaking, guess, as it were, which 2. So instead of giving me, 0, 6, 25, 19, it appropriately understood what the concept of a date is and picked the right 2 numbers. So this is pretty straightforward. I'm going to go ahead and just follow the sort of whole process all the way through so you can see how this sort of works, and then we'll come back and try a few other prompts. So one note here, I see there's some gaps in the actual data. If I wanted to see not necessarily the 10,000 previews, but rather to see only the modified data or only the data that's been changed or modified, I can flip that toggle and it will remove all of the rows or all of the records that don't have any modification. And that just makes it a little bit easier for me to gut check. Did the AI model sort of understand my intent and make the changes that I would want it to make appropriately? So everything looks good. I'm going to go ahead and transform this data. So now what's happened is I'm leaving that preview environment, and the change is now being run across all of my data in my file. And I'll come over here to date built, and it looks like those changes have all been applied. Now, full system visibility exists. So if I look at the actual jobs that were run, I can see clearly that when AI is working in my environment, that is clearly labeled. Anywhere where we're logging some sort of system or human change, we're also logging explicitly when the AI is making a modification. And you have full control over the ability to revert. So let's say I wasn't thrilled with that change for whatever reason. The system is actually taking a snapshot of the change, or sorry, taking a snapshot of the state of my data before the change is applied, and storing that so that after I make my change at any point in the future, I can actually come back and I can roll back that change. So it tells me explicitly that a snapshot was generated before applying an AI transformation, and then it puts the prompt, so it tells me exactly what generated that change. And I can just roll that back. It'll tell me how many records, how many fields, and I can restore to the prior state of the data. And it looks like it restored. There we go. So the build date is back to its prior state. Now, what this means, again, is full control and visibility in the form of prompting, iterating through a prompt, previewing what those changes are going to look like, and then committing those changes and running those changes across my entire data set. But then I can also see like which changes did the system make, and if any of those changes are undesirable or I change my mind at any future point, I can simply roll them back. So we think that AI is going to be quite a powerful tool in this space and can do a lot of powerful things. But we also believe that you should be able to verify those changes and have complete control over the ability to revert those changes. Let's jump back in and do make a few other adjustments to the data. So there are all sorts of things that you can do with AI Transform. You can run calculations. If I had like a property tax field that was empty and it had tax rate and property value, I could just multiply the property value times the tax rate to populate that column. You can merge things, combine things. So I'm going to just let's see here. Why don't we do an amenities? Let's do a conditional thing. So if let's see, this is building type. Let's say if building type is office building. Okay, so if building type is office building, that is that amenities, amenities to free coffee. Why not? And again, what's happening here is the actual data, the model doesn't have any visibility into the actual data. It only has visibility into the actual schema. So it knows what building type is, and knows what amenities is, and it's writing the code, and it looks like that worked perfectly. Again, these are kind of spaced out, so an easy way to gut check whether or not anything that I didn't want included is included in this data. I'll just filter to only modified. It looks like this is pretty uniformed, all office buildings. So this is an example of sort of a conditional prompt, right? So it's like if, and then this reference to another field, then do this other thing somewhere else. Now, what's interesting here is I can actually, while these two are actually related, the amenity is present because of the building type. I can also just add an entirely different command into my prompt. Let's find something else that we maybe want to modify. Let's see. Let's undo this. And then let's say average rent. So average rent is definitely not $22. But probably somewhere in the import, excuse me, the zeros got dropped off. So let's say and add 2 zeros to the average rent values. And I've written essentially one sentence that's asking the model to do this conditional thing, reference one field, create new values in another field, and then modify values in a third field. Uh-oh, looks like that didn't quite work. Oh, I see. So it continued. You can see what happened here. Sort of continued the so I'm just going to say, and this is a good example of modifying the prompt. So continue the condition. So, sort of if this is true, then do these two things. That worked well, but it's not quite what I wanted, which is again, demonstrates really powerfully why we think that the sort of preview mode is so important to understand, okay, is this actually interpreting the data the way that I want it to? There we go. So now I made a very small modification to my prompt to sort of quote unquote better articulate my intent to the model. It interpreted it perfectly and made those modifications. So I now have the conditional if office building, then the amenity is free coffee, and entirely separate operation that's running to correct the data that I have over here in average rent. So I'm gonna go ahead and transform this data. I'm going to stop with the AI transform presentation. It really, this just scratches the surface. There's so much that this tool can do. That from extracting, merging, splitting. We've seen customers that use it to take an address value that comes into one field and split it out into multiple fields. We've seen, like I mentioned before, calculations that are run, conditional prompts. We've seen prompts get quite long. You can write a paragraph worth of text. You can tell it to do 3, 4, 5 different things in a single prompt that would otherwise take a remarkable amount of time clicking through a bunch of UI or making a bunch of individual atomic edits. And again, none of this requires special knowledge of the, a specific formula or how to use a specific tool. You just open it up, you tell it what you want it to do, you preview the changes, and then if you're not 100%, if it doesn't get it 100% of the time accurately on the first try, just make a small modification, run it again, and see if it gets it. I think what we've observed from the data so far, we've seen pretty broad adoption of this product experience amongst our customers. I think on average it takes 1.9 attempts before our customers get to the result that they want, which is pretty magical. The actual time it takes is literally seconds, and you can make very complex modifications across today up to 1 million records. Soon that cap will increase to several million, but to be able to make a modification in a couple of seconds to millions of records just by describing what you want to change, we hope you find to be quite a magical experience. The team is working to ship updates and changes on virtually a weekly basis, so this tool is going to get a lot more powerful in the future. And I will pause there. Godfrey, any questions?
There are loads of questions. Thank you very much for submitting them. We will keep them to the end because even so they are relevant to what you just shared, we'll make sure we get through everything and we'll pick some of those questions. But lots of interests around AI Transform, understandably so, because it's certainly one of the most, let's say, eye-catching features here and highly useful. And that's what I see from the audience. But why don't we move on to the shared views before we get to Alex?
Great. Yeah, absolutely. So there's one more feature that we want to share with you all. We're pretty excited about. There are a lot of changes coming to Flatfile in the vein of collaboration. We know that collaborating on data projects, data import projects, is super important to the success of a project. Having multiple people able to contribute requires having shared context. And so one of the ways in which we're evolving down this collaboration track is through a feature we call shared views. The idea is that we want to make sure that everyone on your team is aligned, has the same shared context. So let me show you how this feature works just real quickly. There are lots of views of the data, and at different points in a workflow, having different views of the data could be important. If you are assigning, for instance, a colleague to address a set of issues, in the data, those issues might be the same in type. And so the actual records from project to project might look different. Which records, meet this criteria or don't meet this criteria may change. But the fundamental structure or the reason why you're looking at this data is more a set of parameters than it is a specific set of records. So we view that as filtering. And so we created this ability to filter the data down, but then save that set of filters and share it so that anyone looking at that view is seeing, the same set of conditions applied to the data, so they stay on the same page. So there are lots of ways that we can do this. We can, look at valid. We can, for instance, look at our invalid records. We might also want to, for instance, only look at invalid, let's say, apartments. All right, so now we're looking at invalid and apartments. Like that's the view. And then let's say with a 1 year lease term. Let's filter to 1 year lease term. Okay, so we've got this set of conditions. Oh, okay. Oh, still present. Okay, 1 year. 1 year lease term. Okay, great. So this is the view that that I want a colleague, let's say, if I was handing this off to Rock and say, hey, Rock, we've got multiple files that have come through here. When we load a new project, there's specifically this group, this 1 year lease term, where they have apartments, and they're often going to sort of be invalid for any number of reasons, valid or invalid. But I want you to sort of take a peek at this group. So what I would do is I can save this view now. I'll call it my invalid apartments underscore 1 year. All right. And you'll see beyond being able to name this, I also have a summary, so I can sort of review. I can make a dozen different changes or parameters in my filter that sometimes are hard to keep track of. So it's a good way for me to actually review the records that are invalid, where property type is equal to apartment, and the lease term is 1 year. I can confirm that's exactly what I was attempting to create. I'm going to save this view, and now I can copy it and to my clipboard. I can paste it. I could share it via Microsoft Teams. I could share it via Slack. I could send it to Rock in an email. And when he clicks on that link and comes back in, what he's going to see is the same thing that I see, because the actual parameters of the filter are present. Now, if one of these records gets resolved, so I say, hey, that 1 year lease, those are going away. These all need to be, updated. This is now 5 year lease. That's going to drop out. So you notice that record disappeared, no longer in this view, because this view is filtered down to invalid, 1 year, and apartment. So now I am able to use that view as well by going into my views. You can see here, I've got my views, invalid apartments, 1 year. I can apply that view. I can copy and share that view again. And then when Rock, in this case, or anyone else on the team goes into the views, all they have to do is open views, and then in all views, they'll be able to see all the views that were created. So taking the work that one person does and paying it off across everyone on the team every time they come back. So we actually took a look at some of our data and saw how often filters were being created, and the same filters were being created, and it's dozens and dozens of times by the same person, and then groups of people. And we started sort of doing this calculation and saw, wow, there's hundreds of hours on a given team that could be saved by just literally providing the ability to save a filter and share that view with others on the team. So we hope that this helps you all and your teams collaborate better, making sure that you all sort of stay on the same page and have the right context, but also that it's a huge time savings and not having to redo the same basic work over and over and over again just to get to the starting line.
Perfect. Well, thank you, John. This was super helpful. And now, after we've heard about AI Transform and shared views, that it's really focused on those business users, those data experts that people work with the data every day. Let's now take a look sort of behind the scenes. So look at what do developers have at their disposal, or what kind of features did we add for developers to better build those data exchange experiences for their users. As mentioned before, the Flatfile Data Exchange Platform is really geared towards those developers to be able to build any kind of data exchange experience that you need for your specific workflow. And Alex from our data experience team is here to share some of the most pertinent features. And again, fair warning, a lot of detail. There is some code to look at, but we'll keep it as light as possible. So Alex, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Gottfried. Share my screen. All right. Here's my slides. Yeah, so I head up our developer experience team. We deal with all of our dashboard and all of our plugins that kind of make our ecosystem really open for all of our developers to use. And I'm just going to briefly go over some stuff about our dashboard first. So we've redone the dashboard recently, mainly showing off like a cleaner design that gives you better access to more data about your data. So we have portal usage metrics, so seeing how many files you've uploaded, how many records you've uploaded, how much data in bytes, and just more metadata about your data. We've also given you apps now, and apps are a way of organizing your portals and projects so you can keep them a bit more organized. We've noticed a lot of people have had hundreds or even thousands of different portals, so it's kind of hard to keep track of, and so this gives you a way of organizing them. And we've given you better logging. So now we have a way of seeing all of your jobs as well as your events. There's going to be a lot more events than jobs, but it's kind of important to see both to get a feel for what's actually happening with all of your data transforms and anything inside of your portals and projects. As part of that as well, we've given you more agents. So before, we've only been able to have one agent per environment, which you can do a lot with, but now with more of them, you can have very specific things you do. So you can have a specific plugin or extractor in just one agent and deploy that across all of your systems at one time. And you can do that now through the dashboard as well as the CLI. Before, you're only able to deploy an agent via the CLI. So now you can do it in the dashboard. So I'll kind of show you all this in the dashboard, and then we'll launch up a portal to show more of it. There we go. So when you first land in the new dashboard, you'll see this screen. This gives a bunch of different apps. So the most common one is going to be your portal app. So this shows, I've been uploading a bunch over the past day or so on this one. So it'll show nice graphs here, some accuracy about how our matching is working, files uploaded, some anonymous guests, and then me. And then here shows all of the actual portals that we've launched. And our agents, here's our spot where we can deploy more agents. So we have some controls here. A library of everything we can deploy. So we've noticed that a lot of people want to have an Excel extractor, JSON, XML, and then we have also just a spot to deploy demos. So I'll deploy all those now, just so our portal can take advantage of them. And then just as a reference, here's our CLI for all you CLI people out there. So we can now look through our current environment and see all of the different agents that we just launched. You can also delete them and overwrite them like normal. In addition, we have all of our event logs. So there's just going to be a bunch here. We have pretty big event ecosystem, so you can dive into the nitty gritty there. And then these are all the different jobs that we've got for just creating those agents, and we'll see even more when we start up a portal. So yeah, now that we have some of these extractors, let's pop over, and this is a super small little portal app that I've made. We'll just call it portal demo. This is our React SDK. So we've made some updates here too to be able to configure a sheet and a space on the fly pretty simply. So you can change the name pretty quickly, and we give access to quick functions here that, yeah, it's a simple way to do it. Pop over here. So you'll notice two things. We have this use event. So again, as I said, we have a pretty large ecosystem of events. So this one is just listening for events and logging them just in your React app inside of the console. So if you wanted to pass any event to any of your own logic there, it's a pretty easy way to get everything to kind of see what's going on. So yeah, let's open this up. So we'll see we have our webinar portal demo like I just changed. Our events are being broadcast down there on the console. Oh. We have our super simple record hook to just say needs email. And we can upload Excel and CSV. I don't have a JSON handy, but we could do that as well. So yeah, both parts fine. Let's map it. So yeah, there we go. Let's pop back over to our portal app. And we'll see we had a couple more files, a couple more bytes of data, and our usage is ticking up fine. So yeah, if you ever wanted to go back to that exact instance, you could open up this portal here and check out what's going on. So yeah, let's pop back over. So yeah, we showed a couple things there. We'll screen this. We also built a little site to show off all of our plugins. So we're growing and growing there. We're adding more extractors and different automations. So feel free to check out that site. It's pulling from our open source repo, just Flatfilers at Flatfile plugins. And then we also have some updated documentation to show off all that we're doing with our SDKs. So the React hooks I showed were use event and use plugin. And there's a bunch of new components to just help you configure everything. So those will be linked in the resources as well. And I think that's everything from me. Feel free to ask any questions.
Thank you, Alex. A fast and furious overview. We do have a change log. If you subscribe to our newsletter, once a month we send up a general update around, which includes links to our change log. You find the change log on the website as well, and you can keep up to date with all this long list of features here. Let me just share back my screen here. And while I do that, a quick reminder, you can ask questions. A lot have come in already, so we'll go through those, but there's still time to add some as we go here. And I'll take a look at those questions and we'll address them to John or Alex as needed, and maybe a few, depending what they are, I'll take myself. Most questions were indeed for AI Transform, as I indicated before. And let's just look at some of those, John. I think they're probably all for you. The first one is, can you restore more changes than just the most recent change to the file?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the Flatfile platform has a feature called snapshots for our pro and enterprise users that's actually used in multiple places across the product. essentially what it does is it takes a snapshot per the feature name of the state of the data at that point in time, and it actually continues to take these snapshots. So in AI transform, it's going to take a snapshot, and then in the future, when you make additional changes using AI transform, it'll take another snapshot. And you go into your version history, and you can actually roll back to any one of those snapshots at sort of any of those points in time. So there's some by account type and setup. There's some variance in how many snapshots you have access to at a given time, but you can roll back to multiple points in the past.
Excellent. Yes, and you actually pointed to something that it's another sort of related question here. The question is, AI transform looks great. How can I try it out? So there are multiple ways. Number one, if you are a Flatfile Pro or Enterprise customers, you will have it as part of your account, and you can use it directly there. If you're not yet, but would like to test drive it, please contact us, and we can enable a trial for that, or include in your POC or whatever you might be working on with our sales team. So please go to our website, contact us, talk to one of our experts about the use case, and we'll make sure you'll get your hands on AI transform. Another related question there is, can the prompt display column names instead of column ID? Some of our column ID is not exactly identical to the column names. So John, what flexibility do we have there?
Yeah, it's a great question. We considered this in the development of the feature, and ultimately where we landed is you can actually reference either, but because the ID is what's truly unique, and there could be multiple column names that are the same, and that would look a little strange in a written prompt or a string of text. What ultimately shows up in prompt is the ID, but when you use that at reference, what you'll see is a little drop down that actually shows the label, so the column name next to the ID. So both are available in the reference when you're trying to figure out which one to use. And then I think the sort of final result that gets populated is ultimately the ID that is unique. But the column label is available also as a reference when you're actually typing it out.
Perfect. And another AI transform question here. Can the AI transform work across sheets within the workbook?
It's a great question. Today it doesn't. Today it's a sheet level action. And so the sort of core principle for the time being is that you're modifying data that you're looking at pretty immediately, and sort of acting on that data. We've considered and played with a few different ideas around how you would sort of do multi-workbook or multi-sheet AI transformation. It's a little bit more complicated, something that we're looking at very seriously, and trying some things in that space. But for today, we think the sort of user experience of being able to, see if that's something that you want to change, call AI transform, open up an environment where you can see the data that you were just looking at, and then sort of modify it is the way that the system works right now. But I'd be very interested. I'm not sure who asked that question, but I'd be very interested in your use case. Sort of like what sort of multi-sheet transformations you'd be interested in running. We're also exploring a concept around saving like larger transformation programs. So you take a bunch of, make a bunch of changes, make a bunch of modifications using AI transform and other tools, and the ability to sort of save all of those and then access those as you move around. So it's sort of one click run a program of transformations on multiple sheets, one or more sheets.
All right. And there was another question, actually, we answered it already online, but might be interesting for the wider audience. Questions about ETL integrations. And overall, there are many ways to integrate with an ETL or work alongside an ETL. We could either feed an ETL as just one of those integration points, and the ETL sort of access the central point of entry for your enterprise systems, or we can work in parallel to an ETL system. ETL, that's sort of that record-to-record data synchronization, and with Flatfile, you get sort of those diverse data files with human interaction in there in parallel. But this one was particularly about Python integration. And Alex, do you want to just talk to that for a moment? I see you already provided the answer one-on-one.
Yeah, we do have like a SDK builder tool that we work with called Fern that helps us build APIs to communicate with different languages. So we have a Python SDK in case you want to connect back to us from your system. So yeah, I just put a link to that in chat.
Thank you very much. Speaking of tools, there was you had the chance to submit questions ahead of the webinar. There were a few of them. Some of them sort of were already, I think, answered throughout the webinar. But there's one question about collaboration with clients on data conversion projects and sort of some tools or recommendations there. In a way, we probably answered some of that, like shared views. That's a good example there. But John, do you have sort of some thoughts on that in general, a recommendation for that question?
Sorry, coming off mute. Is this a question that was submitted beforehand? Because I was
Yes.
trying to look for the details. Can you give me the details again?
The specific question is, what are the best tools to collaborate with clients in data conversion projects?
Okay, I think I saw that. So there wasn't any more to that, because that's very broad, because we would say Flatfile, of course.
Exactly.
So I wasn't entirely sure if there was like a more specific angle on that.
Yeah. It's probably most let's say relevant for us to maybe outline briefly how we would support that use case.
Yeah, so I think yeah, not knowing the sort of specifics of the use case, we're a big fan of this company called Flatfile. We think it's a great product and think you'd love it too. But we would encourage you to set up to use the product, set up an app, and to share a workbook or share a space with your clients. I think the context is maybe a client or sort of customer onboarding. Maybe I'm making a lot of assumptions here. Use case where data is being imported from one system to the next. And in that workbook, in that space, it really is a collaborative environment. So whether it's your team taking in that data and then making a bunch of modifications and then making sure that your customers can review it, or your customers doing that directly in that space, a lot of the tools that we've designed are to sort of have an environment where you have the freedom and flexibility to get your data into the right shape before you import it into your destination system. And for everyone to have a view of that, something like shared views is really great when you're working in particular internally, or even potentially between customers. Maybe there's a set of records that you think, hey, there's a set of, there's an issue here with these types of records, and you can create that view and just share a link back to them. They can jump in, make some modifications, get it into the right shape, so that it can be imported into your destination system. So we have more work that we're doing here, more features that are coming. We've got a whole sort of roadmap around collaboration. So the collaborative abilities will be growing in that space. So hopefully that answers the question. It feels like a softball setup for what tools are great for data onboarding collaboration. We vote Flatfile.
There's actually a more detailed follow-up question by somebody else just while you're talking about that. I think that might also help explain the collaboration a little bit. When we create a view, how is it shared with others? Download? No, it's not. then can they make changes and back to you? How do they make changes they mentioned manually? So I think that is all about that. Maybe that's worth explaining a little bit more, John.
Yeah, great. So I'll take these these in two parts. So a shared view can be shared, is sort of automatically shared one way, and can be shared manually another. So every shared view has a link that you can share via any channel that you want, email, Slack, Teams. If you want to write it down on the back of a napkin and drop it off at somebody's desk, that'll work too. It's a fairly long link, so not necessarily recommended. But you can take that link and distribute it to whomever, however you prefer, as long as the person receiving it has access to that space, which I would assume that they would. Then they will be able to see that shared view when they click on or type in that URL. There's a second way, which is that if they have access to the space, then they can also just go into the same sheet. And when they open their views, that sort of view drop down, they'll see my views, which are the views that they create for themselves, but then also see all views. And those are the views that were created by others. And so views are by default shared, they're open and collaborative, and everyone has access to them. So those would be sort of the two ways, sort of in the platform via the UI, under the views tab, and then via the link that could be shared via any channel that you prefer. The second question around making modifications and sending back, I'm going to take this in sort of two parts because I'm not entirely sure if I'm fully understanding this question. So the first is modification to the records. So you can make modifications to the records in all the same ways that you do today. You can make what we call atomic edits manually in the individual record, cell by cell. You can also use AI transform. So you can AI transform works on a filtered view of the data. So you could filter down to a set of records and then click into AI transform. It'll bring that filtered view into that safe space and allow you to iterate on your prompt until you get the transformation to the place that you want and commit it. And then anyone else coming back into that shared view will see those modifications. They'll see those changes. Those changes are shared across everyone who has access to that view. Now, there might have been another question in there around modifying the view itself. So if I filtered, to, invalid apartments 1-year lease, what if I want to change that view to be 5-year lease? So that is actually breaking out of the view. So we don't have the ability today to allow you to edit a view or update a view in terms of updating the parameters that define the view. So today that's off limits. If you wanted to update, if you want to change from 1 year to 5-year, it would just sort of like undo the view, and then you could save a new view, name it whatever you'd like, and get a new link, and that could be shared either via link or accessible in the UI in that dropdown by everyone in the space. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, John. It sounds like there's the sort of probably a longer tail set of additional questions. Lisa, who asked that question, just dropped in more details. It's probably better to take that offline because that looks like their specific use case, how they're using Flatfile. So Lisa, I would say our customer success team can follow up with you on that afterwards and discuss that in a little bit more detail. As we're running up to the top of the hour here and make sure everybody can get to their next meeting after this. There's one last question that sort of leads us to the conclusion here. How can I try this out? How can I find out more about the difference between our starter plan and pro plan and enterprise, for example? Those collaboration features we just talked about are not in the starter plan. They are in the pro and enterprise plans. We do have a pricing section on the website with a comparison matrix between those different plans. You can look at that. But I would certainly encourage you to let us know if you're interested, if you'd like to learn more and talk one-on-one with one of our experts about our use cases. Otherwise, there are demos on the website. And of course, you can sign up for the platform and dig in there if you're a developer. That's sort of As we discussed before, as Alex showed us, it's a developer platform there with lots of bells and whistles, but personally, I'm not for me. So, so in that case, talk to one of our experts. And with that, thank you very much for joining. John, Alex, thank you very much for participating, sharing all those great features in the webinar. I hope everybody has a great rest of their day, and thank you very much. Bye-bye.